Hey everybody, welcome back to Theosophy. This is the fifth in the occultism series, and I'm going to be talking about evocation. So, evocation has a lot in common with ceremonial magic because ceremonial magic is often about appeasing or communing with something divine, often a spirit or angel or demon or God, well, most often a God, in order to garner something material. So, what difference does that have with evocation? And the chiefest difference between evocation and ceremonial magic is that evocation is an attempt to bring that being into the presence of the person who's performing it. In some cases, to even be possessed by that being. And we see that a lot, for example, in a number of magical traditions like voodoo. Um, you see it in a number of mythologies. In Norse and Germanic mythologies, the ecstatic state that was associated by what most people consider to be henbane for berserkers, in many respects that was a form of possession, which is a subset of evocation. So the big difference between ceremonial magic and evocation is that you are calling a being into a presence. And in some cases, this is because that being doesn't really want to answer your prayers or your sacrifices under normal circumstances. So I can think of no more dramatic example in this than the evocation and rituals involving demons. The Goetia is a good example. I mean, in those instances, a demon is conjured from the plane of existence that they're from and are trapped within a circle that is made on the surface of the earth. So what you're really doing is you're bringing them to the earth and you're putting them there in order to strike a bargain or to, uh, I guess you could call it like a trade. It's an exchange. It's a compact. It's a contract, and invocation has a lot of stigma behind it for those reasons because it is dangerous, especially if unintentionally or intentionally the end result of that evocation is possession. If you're dealing with benevolent deities, like in the case of voodoo most often, that possession is very, very temporary. Ooh, didn't mean for that to have meter and rhyme to it. I think I did that before once actually for one of these vids. But it doesn't last. There's a state of ecstasy, but then it doesn't last. Whereas in the case of demonic possession, that might not be the case. So it's probably, I would certainly argue that evocation is the most dangerous form of occultism and of magic, excluding one that's going to come much later that I don't think anybody could possibly be on board with, excluding a handful of elites. But evocation, the big danger is that a lot of times the being in question doesn't necessarily want to be there and will have some sort of price in exchange for whatever it is that that person has evoked them for. And sometimes these evocation prices can be very, very paltry from a human perspective. You know, a glass of milk, a shot of liquor, something to that effect. But sometimes it calls for things that are a lot steeper, and that's where we get the, I would say, almost Jungian. Actually, I wonder if Jung did write about it at all. I haven't looked into that. But the concept of a Faustian pact, the concept of making a bargain with an otherworldly being, and then the price being far greater. We see it a lot in stories like Greek stories involving fate and hubris have that kind of underlying theme. The Monkey's Paw, real famous short story, has that underlying thing. The notion of wanting something really, really badly and then getting it, and it not being the way you actually wanted to get it, and then the price that comes attached to what you got being insurmountably higher than anything that you ever would have, under a rational circumstance and having foresight, would have wanted. So, yeah, in that respect, conjuration is a subset of evocation because you're bringing something to that plane. Summoning is another word that's often used for it. You don't really see it a lot in the Eastern traditions, interestingly enough. I think largely because for them, ceremonial magic tends to be enough because a lot of those beings that are willing to communicate with people are not really in a position, or at the very least have any desire to traverse to other planes of existence like the ones that humans inhabit. So I think that covers the majority of what evocation is, what conjuration is. It's much more ritualistic, to a point where, if you mess up with most ceremonial magic, there could be consequences. But if you mess up with evocation, with summoning, conjuration, uh, the consequences could be extremely, extremely dramatic. Assuming any of this is true, you know. But yeah, the consequences could be possession, could be tremendous consequences, because now you haven't earned you haven't created a contract with this being. Instead, this being's just mad that you pulled them out of the plane of existence that they were from, and now they just want to punish you for it. That's a very realistic fear when people talk about occultism. In fact, I would argue that just about every instance of occultism that is depicted in pop culture tends to show exactly that. It tends to show people messing with things they shouldn't be meddling in, and the consequences are high. It's one of those things where if it was on a DVD box, they'd have the little tagline, these teens were real hellraisers, and now there's hell to pay, or something to that effect. So, yeah, it's something that I have never actively participated in, but then again, I'm not really much of an occultist. I like to study these things in a subjective, and I would argue somewhat skeptical way, but I like to categorize things. In fact, I like the occult in a categorical sense, the same reason why I like taxonomy of animals in a categorical sense. You can't really pigeonhole every animal, and yet we've managed to, in a really unique system that works really well. And we do have to change it from time to time because genetic testing will show this or that, but by and large, it's pretty effective, and I enjoy that aspect of occultism. The idea of, it's one of the reasons why I love the Goetia, because it's basically like an Audubon field guide to demons. But that's all I got for this one. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.